People seek out a lot of one-sided relationships, and then they wonder why they feel lonely. By a one-sided relationship, I mean one where you don't have to consider the other person's feelings truly. Today, it's growing ever more common for people to seek out relationships that, and I'm using relationship broadly, not even necessarily with a human being. I mean, people are falling in love with AI chatbots and things like that. So, by relationship, I just mean any attempt at a emotional relationship by one person to any other thing that is a surrogate human being. And it's easy to understand why people are increasingly gravitating towards that kind of one-sided relationship. It's because it's so much easier. It's because if you trick yourself into thinking that a machine is a human being, if you deceive yourself into thinking that a pet is a substitute for a real child, if you convince yourself that some sex worker on the internet is who you send money to, or in real life, I suppose, a sex worker in real life, also just a prostitute. But anything like that, if you convince yourself that that is the same thing as having a real romantic sexual relationship with another human being, if you convince yourself of these things, then things in the short term become easier, because you can just not put in the time or the effort or the care or the pain that would be necessary if this was a two-sided relationship, if this was a mutual relationship. If it's a one-sided relationship in which only your needs truly matter, well, that's going to be easier, and in the short term, it's going to have a lot of advantages for a little while in the short term, but then in the long term, it's going to become quite the opposite, and it's going to destroy you. Maybe not all at once, but it'll eat you away and destroy you bit by bit. And so people are increasingly moving towards doing that. They seek out ways in which they can have a quasi-social relationship with something or someone, and they can sort of role play like they are genuinely engaging in the behavior that they are mimicking. But that's all it is. It's mimicry. It's not real. And I think that's a bad trend. I think, and I'm not doom and gloom about it. People, there are trends, things come and go. So this might be something that evaporates mostly over time. It's entirely possible, but it's also possible that this is the trend going forwards as people become more isolated and more inclined to just seek out the easiest, most comfortable thing they can without looking for something real, something that has more meaning, even if it's more painful and more difficult in the long term, or rather the short term. It's more difficult, more painful in the short term, more beneficial in the long term. People should, I think for their own good, I think people should seek out things that have more long-term meaning and avoid such short-term comfort and gratification that ultimately leads nowhere. And of course, it is ultimately up to each individual person what he or she wants to do. But then each person has to ultimately live with those consequences too. And because on the one hand, we see people crowing victory about how wonderful it is that that they are not dating, not seeking out romantic partners. But then they also are clearly unhappy with at least some aspects of this choice. And it's strange. I think it's strange to see people boasting about their choices, and then out of the other side of their face, they are just bemoaning how miserable those choices make them. And it's not confined to this issue or anything like that. It's just a universal. Human beings do this, but it still is frustrating and revealing, because then it shows that maybe people are overcompensating when they boast, and they are not truly as satisfied with their choices as they might appear or wish to appear. And what can be done about it? Well, I think we just unfortunately have to let some people implode, is a bad way of putting it, but we have to. It's not like we can stop people from imploding, but we have to just wait until there are enough negative outcomes that it can't really be denied, and people can't pretend like everything's okay. Because that's what people do. They pretend, oh no, they pretend everything's fine, and they pretend that everything is going to be fine until it's not, and then they say, oh, why didn't anyone warn me about this? Why didn't anyone warn us about this? And in reality, people usually do warn the people who are making these questionable choices while they are in the process of making them. People do warn them, and even if people didn't warn them, I mean, at some point, the responsibility is your own, and the choice is your own. And we just have to live with the consequences of our own choices, and we should try to help each other. That's why I would encourage people to seek out mutual relationships and not just one-sided relationships, because the more that we don't have other human beings who we have to be on some level responsible for and care for, the less that we have that, in our lives, then the more, the more lonely we're going to become. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. That sort of goes without saying, that the more we don't have people who we are responsible for in some way, and I'm not saying totally responsible, like totally dependent on us or anything. I mean, I do think that is helpful, very helpful, psychologically speaking, in the long term, also to experience that, to have people who are totally dependent on you. I think that is very helpful and healthy, and does help us mature a lot and help us understand human nature a lot more, and who we really are, our own nature. But even just having to really think about and consider the feelings of another person in a mutual, real, romantic relationship, just as an example, as opposed to paying someone to pretend to be your romantic partner in whatever form that takes, or the people who try to trick themselves, and sadly are often genuinely deceived into thinking that they are in love with machines. But you're never going to really love a machine. I don't think so. I think it's just deception. I think it's self-deception. I don't think anyone can genuinely fall in love with a machine. But I would strongly advocate that people seek out mutual relationships in which you have to think about someone else, think about someone else's feelings and thoughts, and really value them, and hopefully love them. Love them and value them over yourselves. That's what love is. And don't just seek out one-sided relationships that are easier in the short term, that gain you nothing in the long term.